Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started. Darien Library has had the good fortune to partner with YWCA Parent Awareness on several parenting programs over the past few years. We'd just like to say thank you to all the friends of the library who make all our events possible, including our parenting programs. Just wanted to let you know, I'm going to introduce Diane in a minute, but we do have some books that were recommended by our panelists. We also have a book list with some of the books that aren't available right now in the library. We also have an article and some other materials if you're interested after the event. So I'd just like to introduce Diane, who will introduce our moderator.
Anyway, I'm Diane Barston. I'm one of the coordinators for Parent Awareness with Pam Haas-Stevenson, and we'd like to thank the library for co-hosting the program with us this evening. And before I introduce our moderator, I just wanted to point out that we are also offering a panel discussion next Tuesday evening with, it's going to be targeted towards parents of middle school and high school students. So even if you've got some maybe older elementary school students that are fifth grade going into middle school, it might be worthwhile for you to think about coming next Tuesday evening as well. And we also have something at the end of November, if you're on the other end of the spectrum, a kindergarten readiness panel. So if you've got some kids who are still in nursery school, we've got 5 district specialists and administrators and a nursery school director who is going to speak to some of the things that they look for in kids when they're transitioning from nursery school to kindergarten. We are happy to have Terrie Wood here as our moderator. I'm sure some of you recognize Terrie. She's around town a lot. She is the state representative for Darien and Norwalk, and she's been a member of the Connecticut State House of Representatives since 2008. And she is also the co-chair of the Mental Health Working Group of the Gun Violence Bill. And Terrie, when she was co-chairing this legislation, I wrote this down because I thought this was so important, said, "We have a responsibility to learn more and lead more and educate our citizens about mental health and behavioral issues." And that's why we're all here this evening. We all feel very important about that. In addition, Terrie is the Connecticut Advisory Board Chair of the Trust for Public Land, which is a nonprofit national land preservation organization. She's also served as the president of the Darien Land Trust, was a member of the Community Fund Allocations Panel, co-founded the Darien Environmental Group, and was a board of trustees for the Darien Library. We are thrilled to have her here, and I hope you'll join me in welcoming Terrie Wood.
Thank you, Diane, and thank you to Pam and Diane so much for organizing this. Our kids are now above 21, and I could not have survived as a parent without Parent Awareness in the YWCA, so it was tremendously influential for me as a parent in learning just how to guide our kids and what the feelings were and what the issues were and sharing that with other parents. So thank you both, and to you both very much for this. And thank you all for coming out, because I know it's hard with young kids or medium-aged kids to get out on a school night. But what we learn in this forum is so helpful and so crucial as a community. And lastly, thank you to the panel members, because I know you all have very busy schedules. So I will quickly introduce them, and what we're going to do is each panelist will speak on how they're seeing stress in their different avenues of experience, and then describe how they suggest balancing that stress in their lives. So first is Lavi Ben-Zvi, and Lavi is the coordinator for student and family social services for Darien Public Schools, and he works with families from all 5 elementary schools in town. Prior to becoming coordinator, Lavi was the school psychologist at Royal Elementary School. Yes, sorry, a little loyalty there. For 7 years. Lavi received his Bachelor of Arts from Hunter College in New York and his Master of Education in School Psychology from Queens College. And in addition, Lavi was awarded an Intermediate Administrative Certification from Sacred Heart University in Fairfield. Next is Dr. Chris Bogart. And Dr. Bogart is the Executive Director of the Southfield Center for Development here in Darien. He's a licensed clinical psychologist who has worked in both the private and public sectors for the past 20 years. Dr. Bogart works with children, adolescents, and parents, conducting comprehensive psychoeducational and ADHD evaluations as well as therapy services. He also provides program consultations to local schools as well as supervision to the doctoral students in psychology, which is an enormous thing to provide that real-life experience to students who are getting their doctorates. In addition, Dr. Bogart serves as school psychologist at the New Canaan Country School, and he graduated from Georgetown and received his doctorate from American University. Luke Forshaw is the principal of Oxbridge Elementary School in Darien. He received his bachelor's in psychology with an elementary education certification from Trinity in Hartford. He has a master's degree from the Teachers College at Columbia University and is working on his doctorate. Ooh, lots of papers. Maybe stress. Doctoral stress. That's another panel, right? Luke has worked in the Darien Public Schools for the past 11 years. He began as a third grade teacher and later worked as district coordinator of instructional technology, teaching students and coaching teachers in kindergarten through grade 12. He also volunteers as a board member for the nonprofit organization Reach Newtown. And lastly is Dr. Jamie Roach Murray. Dr. Murray is a pediatrician at Stamford Pediatric Associates who grew up in Darien. She studied religion and bioethics at Princeton, received her medical degree from UConn School of Medicine, and completed her residency at Emory University Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, which is one of the top hospitals for children in the country. Dr. Murray recently joined the Darien YWCA Board of Directors and has been a member of the Thriving Youth Task Force here in town. And she has a special interest in vaccine safety and community health initiatives, especially those that benefit children and families. So thank you all again. And we'll start with Lavi.
Thank you. So I think that we were talking about discussing what we see commonly in our respective areas in terms of stress and anxiety and how we try to assist in those types of situations. My experience has been primarily in the elementary level, so kindergarten through 5th grade. And stress and anxiety coming in various forms and different levels. We have kindergartners who are having some difficulty adjusting to the structure, of elementary school. Kids who are having difficulty with, perfectionism tendencies, coping with, measuring up or feeling anxious about their academic performance, social concerns with, between themselves and other kids, and also various issues that based on family life. We see a lot, and at, again, varying different levels. One of the really nice things that we've had, that we're now in our 3rd year of implementation district-wide, is a social emotional learning curriculum, which is called Second Step. Some of you might be familiar with. If you have kids in elementary schools, then you probably heard about it at this point. This is it's a curriculum that runs. There's a kit for preschool that starts at preschool, and in fact, the early learning program is utilizing that as well. And it actually runs, I believe, through middle school. Though we're at this point, it's in Darien. We're running it ELP, the preschool program, and then K through 5. What's really nice about this program is that in addition to teaching very important concepts such as empathy and problem solving, it also has a very big emphasis on understanding emotions, understanding your own feelings, understanding others' feelings, and seeing these things in perspective. And so these are whole class discussions which are typically done on a weekly basis. And it gives the kids a chance to hear how their peers are handling sort of typical scenarios or situations that are age appropriate for their developmental level. In terms of stress and anxiety, one of the powerful tools that come from this, and if you look at the books and resources in the handouts over here, you'll see that a lot of the themes, they talk about mindfulness, and that's a concept that is incorporated in this curriculum. And one specific example is in terms of utilizing very simple but effective strategies such as mindful breathing, and using the time to sort of stop yourself when you're having a strong feeling, and then centering yourself, taking a moment to calm down, and then thinking about it clearly before you move on to understanding what level that might be at, looking for identifying your own body's response to really see at what level you might be at. So it's almost like a feeling thermometer, and it's about self-awareness. So these are concepts that are taught again. Every classroom, every child, kindergarten through 5th grade, and the themes, the major themes stay the same, but they change in terms of the scenarios or the types of issues that you would typically find with a child at that age level. That's been one of my continuing efforts have been to make sure that this is a curriculum that's being implemented with fidelity, and that this is something that teachers are comfortable utilizing. And then there's also a home component that I'm trying to get parents on board with, because I think that's sort of, for me, the real that one piece that is really crucial, and we need to make sure that that's happening as well, so that you guys are informed about what it is that these kids are learning in the classroom. You get the same common language that you can use at home, and then help reinforce these skills across all settings. So that's a lot about that specific program, but this is something this is kind of a very wide initiative that I feel is helpful. Many things, but stress and anxiety as well.
Great, thank you. I know we're supposed to wait to ask questions, but I'm dying to ask a question, but I'll wait. Chris.
You can ask a question if I don't have to. I don't delay my own stress of speaking. So.
Sure, I'll ask the question then. Is there any resistance so far? This is in the 3rd year?
So this is the 3rd year where it's implemented by all classroom teachers, K through 5. For that, several individuals, including myself, have been teaching it. I've been running it for several years at Royal, with all kindergarten and 1st grade, and then with upper grade levels, but depending on children who were in special needs. But yes, in terms of whole wide scale implementation, this is the 3rd year.
Is there any resistance?
From the classroom teachers or
from the parents?
The parents.
No.
No, nobody's complained about it. I think that we've heard, really what we want to make sure is we just want to make sure that there's more awareness of it. So, and hopefully there's that we don't see resistance in terms of asking them to follow through with strategies.
Great, thank you very much. Chris?
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, first of all, to Diane and Pam for all you guys have done to organize this evening. As Terrie mentioned, I'm the director of the Southfield Center over here in Darien, down by the skating rink. And in that position, the work that I typically do is overseeing a team of 25 clinicians who work with various different childhood issues, probably the number one issue being kids who are dealing with stress and anxiety. As I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about this evening, I felt that it would probably be a good starting spot for all of us to have kind of a similar conceptual understanding of what is stress and what are the sort of the ways that it manifests itself, both in positive as well as negative ways. And a lot of times you'll hear kids say, I'm so stressed out, or you'll hear parents certainly say, I'm so stressed out. If you really boil stress down, all stress is a physical reaction, the body's response to some change that's going on in your environment. And that change is causing your body to react in a way that is releasing adrenaline and cortisol into your system. In and of itself, stress is not a bad thing. And in fact, what a lot of research has shown is that for kids to develop appropriately, they actually need different experiences of stress, facing those experiences and being able to overcome them as a way of developing their sense of self, their sense of self-esteem. And so if you think of stress as really being a continuum, where in one end of the continuum you have what's called eustress, which is kind of positive stress, the preparation for a test, and then you go and you take the test and you perform well and you feel good about yourself, or the soccer practice that teaches you how to do various different moves and work with your teammates, and then you go and score a goal and you feel good about that. That's a positive form of stress that helps children to develop resilience, develop a sense of that feeling of stability in their life. Unfortunately, we also live in a world where there are a lot of different unpredictable things that come into kids' lives, and that's where it starts moving down that continuum into feelings of distress, where you have more negative reactions because the child doesn't feel like they can control their environment sufficiently, and there's too much stress coming at them for them to be able to juggle that. In that sort of a situation, what happens is the child on a consistent basis is being impinged with various different physical reactions, which Jamie's going to talk more about, and various different emotional reactions. And that's where it starts overtaxing some of the developmental capabilities, and that's some of what Luke's going to talk about. What I'm going to talk about, though, is when it moves a little bit further down that path and becomes an actual anxiety response. And anxiety is something that we're seeing more and more in kids at earlier and earlier stages of development. And there's been a lot of theorizing out there as to what's causing some of these difficulties that kids are experiencing and why they're turning into true anxiety reactions. Anxiety is the body's alarm mechanism that tells us that something is out of balance. And so if you really start to dig into what seems to be triggering off a lot of the anxiety situations that kids are experiencing, it seems to fall into a few specific categories. One reason why kids seem to be experiencing a lot more anxiety today than they might have 20, 25 years ago is just simply the number of stimuli that kids have to deal with on a day-to-day basis is significantly greater than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 50 years ago. And the theory is that just the number of stimuli that the brain has to process is simply overloading kids' ability to juggle all those different pieces. And what the anxiety is a mechanism in the brain that's basically saying there's too much coming in and I can't make sense out of it. Another piece that's been thrown out there as a reason why kids are experiencing more anxiety these days is what's called the hurried child phenomenon. And there was a book that was put out about 10 years ago by a guy by the name of David Elkind, who's written a couple of fantastic books. If you haven't read any of his material, I really would put him on your list of authors to read. He's a big proponent of helping kids get back into natural play as a way of helping them to develop a sense of their self. But one of the things that he wrote about was this concept of kids really being hurried in terms of the different developmental demands that they need to face on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of what he talks about is how, earlier and earlier into elementary school, we now have kids who are taking examinations to get into, specific private school situations, or we have kids who are joining premier teams on a day-by-day basis, and these premier teams are great opportunities for them, but also putting them in a situation where they have to perform at a level and constantly be in a situation of being evaluated for their performance. And the theory is that as kids are hurried down that developmental path, they don't have some of the mechanisms in place to really be able to help them juggle some of that. And then a final theory that's been put out there is relatively similar to some of these pieces, but just the simple fact of kids being overscheduled. That instead of kids having one activity a week or one activity a month, or some small number of different activities that are relatively manageable, more and more we have kids who have 2, 3, 4 after school activities and having to juggle 2 or 3 of them on the same day. And that amount of scheduling just puts kids into a position where they don't have any sense of control over what their day-to-day life is like. And so these are a lot of the theories that are being put out there as to why we're seeing this explosion in different sorts of anxiety symptoms and a lot of the psychological issues that go along with that. In my practice over at the center, one of the things that we are trying to work with families on that come to us is that we'll work with kids individually, doing some of the stuff that Lavi was mentioning in terms of teaching kids mindfulness, teaching kids how to feel a sense of control over their environment. But what we also are doing a lot with is working with families of really trying to set better expectations in terms of what their kids should be involved in, and really trying to help parents learn that it's okay to say no, that they don't need to provide 10 different after school activities for their kid for that child to be able to feel competent, or for that child to be able to feel like they're doing the same things that their peers are doing. And trying to make some of those decisions and help kids make those decisions with their parents is tremendously difficult, because if your best friend is playing soccer and joining doing some afternoon science club, and also going for tutoring, and also doing this, that, and the other thing, if your friends are doing all these things, you naturally have this feeling as a child that you want to be doing some of the same stuff. And so you're going to be in a situation where you're not going to be able to manage some of those decisions. And that's where we're trying to help parents to be able to set those expectations with their kids, to be able to really set priorities, and to be able to also schedule into their kids' lives just the feeling of the ability to have an afternoon where you don't have anything planned, to be able to sit back and actually breathe and have to stop and think, what do I want to do this afternoon? I don't have anything planned for me. So what you'll see in the handout that I provided, just because I tend to talk way too long, what I did is I tried to summarize some of these thoughts and came out with, I surveyed my staff of the various different things that they're working with families on in terms of how to balance kids' lives, and we came up with our top 10 list of things that we're working with parents on, and you'll see that in the handout that is over there. So I don't know if I want to pass that piece around. A couple of the ones that I've already mentioned are scheduling in family quiet time, turning off all technology for a period of time, and being able to give kids the sense of you have to figure out what your stimulation is going to be without Google telling you what it's going to be, or without Minecraft telling you what it's going to be. Really helping to provide kids with better prioritization of some of their schedule. Being able to help parents to model appropriate balance in their lives by making very explicit reference to the things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis to help you calm yourself. noting, teaching your kids through what you do in terms of nutrition and what you do in terms of exercise, what you do in terms of all the different areas of your life where you de-stress, really making that very explicit for your kids so that they're able to pick up a lot of that. And helping your kids understand how to evaluate the things that are stressing them in their life, whether these are mountains or molehills, really teaching kids how to put some of their stressors on a continuum and to be able to look at the molehills for what they really are, that they might be a little bump in the road, but it's okay and you're going to be able to get through that. The things that are mountains, take a step back and let's stop and think of how you're going to plan your way through that so that you give your kids some of the different strategies to work your way through that. So those are some of the different pieces, and you'll see in the handout that's going around right now some of the other ideas that we have. So before I end up taking more than my time, I'll...
Great, thank you, Chris. And if there are not enough handouts, I've looked at this very quickly, and it's quite good. They can get more. Great. It'll be on the... Pam Haas-Stevenson mentioned it'll be on the website. Luke.
Good evening. I'm a school principal, and so that means I get to work with kids and I work with adults. And in both those roles, we have the same kind of focus, which is making sure that we're supporting healthy, positive development for children across all kinds of domains, physical, cognitive, emotional. And I was thinking a lot about tonight and how I might be helpful to talk about stress and how to help you understand a little more about stress and how to help you understand how to help your child with stress. And what dawned on me is how important it is to have a very solid understanding of developmental appropriateness. I think that how adults relate to children has a big impact on the way that children relate to themselves. And that's a sort of simple idea, but one I see recurring time and again. I work a lot with teachers who are asking me questions about how can I support a child through something, whether it's an academic concern or a social emotional concern or behavioral concern. I talk a lot with parents who come to me, how can I support my child through something? And I try to begin those conversations by rooting what we're talking about in actually the kid in front of us. And my one piece of information I kind of keep in the background of my mind all the time is a great text, and I thought, if nothing else tonight, if I can just plug this book and talk a little bit about it, it would be very useful for you. Chip Wood wrote a kind of seminal text on child development. He's from the New England Foundation for Children. This is an organization that supports a lot of responsive classroom work, which is work that's really about teaching kids explicit strategies for understanding expectations for behavior and how to manage yourself. And this book, Yardsticks, pretty much draws on years of professional experience from Chip's life as a teacher and principal, and he's drawing on lots of solid developmental theorists to give you a sense of like what, in general terms, are 8-year-olds like. In general terms, are 6-year-olds like. And what are the expectations about those kinds of general ways of being? And it's pretty helpful. It's pretty readable too. I thought that would be useful. For example, you can flip to a section here about 5-year-olds, and it'll break down for you kind of the 5-year-olds. What are they up to relative? And in broad terms, because every 5-year-old is different, right? They're individuals. But in broad terms, what are the visual and fine motor abilities of a 5-year-old, typically speaking? And it'll kind of break down that they're still developing left to right visual tracking. So they tend to focus on one word at a time when reading. They need to find the use of a pointer to keep their finger, to keep on track. And there's lots and lots, chock full of information about these kinds of predictable milestones for kids at varying age levels. And I think that's very powerful to take time as an adult to get a really solid understanding of what is reasonable to expect of my 7-year-old daughter. Because from that place, you can understand more specifically what's going on with your child as they relate to the world. And I think that informs you as you think about, should I be worried about the fact that they might be bossy in play dates? Should I be worried about the fact that right now they're jumping from task to task, that talks about 8-year-olds as wanting to try out a lot of different tasks, and they might not master them all, but they want to cycle through them and get the experience in them, and how that's pretty developmentally typical. And I think there's something powerful in having that knowledge, because it allows you as the adult to feel a little more secure in your knowledge of the developmental pathway that children are going through, and how you relate to your child. Therefore, you're in a more calm, kind of accepting place where you can listen and work side by side with kids. I wanted to be brief in my talk, because I'm more interested in hearing from you and trying to answer questions and help you navigate all the ways that we support children. I think you've heard from Lavi and Chris. I'm sure Jamie will talk about their varying perspectives about how they have services to support kids. I can certainly talk about it from the school perspective, our commitment to serving kids. So I'll be brief and just mention one other text that is good. Passed it along. I think it's valuable. I can put the link on my personal Twitter feed if you're so inclined. The Times just published a piece. I see Lavi's got it as well. Great minds thinking alike. Overscheduled children, how big a problem? And this is from October 11th of this year. And what's really interesting is, like Chris is referring to a lot of the theories about what's causing stress and the overscheduled nature of children. And the article delves into that, and it moves a little further and talks about, it's about how kids view those scheduled events and how parents talk about those scheduled events. That really is the qualifier for how kids experience going to soccer practice. To be specific, it's if children feel that they're on the premier team, and that being on the premier team is about the evaluation of their performance and their ability to get the most goals and to have the best stats, and less about, kicking the ball, that seems to stand to reason that they're going to be more stressed about that. And so as a parent, and as a parent in a community like Darien, where we value providing lots of opportunities for kids, this article helped me feel assuage a little bit of the guilt of, wow, I sure have my kids in a lot of activities. If in those activities kids have healthy relationships to them, and simple little litmus tests that you can look at when kids are going to football practice, or they're going to dance recital. Are they smiling? Are they laughing? Are they running out of the car? Are they dragging their feet? And I think a lot of the times that just requires us as adults to take our own concerns about our kids' performance, and where are they, and should they be this way, should they not be this way, and slow, calm, be mindful, and watch kids. There's a lot of intuitive data, so to speak, just from being a really good kid watcher. So I'll answer questions at a later point, but that's...
Great, thank you, Luke. Jamie.
A lot has been said already. Perspective, I see a lot of kids stressed, and I see a lot of parents who are anxious, stressed, and most of the time it shows up as I'm stressed, my child is stressed, what do we do? My child is having trouble sleeping. But that's very common these days, which happens for some people, but often not for the common. My child's having headaches, now having temper tantrums that he or she never previously had. I don't understand what my child is clinging to. She used to love going to soccer, and now she won't get out of the car. All these are, the common theme is that it's a behavioral change, and very often a behavioral change that time stress or anxiety. Sometimes the behavioral change is sort of a side conversation in the stress I see in parents. There's a lot of pressure in our community to do all the right things. So you need to go on Pinterest and exactly who's made the perfect lunch for their child and how it's totally balanced, and that they have a morning checklist that you can have on the wall, and your kid will be perfect too. And your clothes can be just right. And there's a lot of pressure today, and we have 24-hour access to that, and we all walk around with smartphones and computers and us and as Chris was talking about, stress is normal. It's an appropriate response, and it's not all bad. But when it becomes dysfunctional in your life and disrupts, I think as parents, sometimes the first about where we are and managing our own stress. And our lives are stressful, and our children are having a transition challenge, whether it be school or friend. There's nothing. Best friend suddenly have another best friend. That's devastating. But if that child comes home and is weepy, not falling asleep at night, and we are stressed as parents, very often our reaction is to yell at them and to not stop and say, what's going on here? Is this my problem or my child's problem, or how can I be supportive? Maybe I need to stop and be more stressed, and how I need to evaluate where I'm rushing from work today, and my kids are at home with my babysitter, and my husband's traveling, and that's, we do these things because they're, sometimes we have to stop and say, I can be, don't always say, next month I'm going to have a very stressful week, so could you schedule your life so that you're there for me? And that's what's hard. But, when those things happen, thankfully, we can go. All of you have a life that you could. Chris at the Southfield Center, who has 25 clinicians there ready to help, or referring to this program in our school systems that our kids. Doesn't undermine that each person feels stress, but hopefully remind you when that stress is higher level.
Thank you very much. Just to echo what Jamie said, I think when we were working on the mental health task force, when we were working on the mental health bill this past session, one of the things we wanted to stress was to destigmatize mental illness and also make people more aware that it's okay to feel certain sadness, feel anxiety, and help is out there, and there's no shame in asking for help. And I think the resources, we're very lucky in our community to have a lot of supportive families, a lot of supportive school personnel, a lot of supportive counseling services available in our town, great doctors, and it's all there for the asking, and there's nothing wrong with asking. Anyway, also thank you, Jamie, for outlining the list of how you're seeing stress manifest itself. Are there any other suggestions that you all have on things you're seeing in stress? Other ways stress is manifesting itself other than what Jamie mentioned?
I think I think certainly things we've tapped into, but what I am seeing a lot more of, and I'd love to hear from Lavi and Luke whether it's representative of what you're seeing in the schools. But when I first started out in private practice 20 plus years ago, certainly there was anxiety issues and kids, reacting to some of that. What I've noticed more recently are the number of calls that we're getting for kids who are just not able to get out of bed and get to school, the school avoidance piece. And that's why I didn't know if it was something you guys are seeing as an increasing issue within the district schools. It's certainly something we're hearing more in the center of. That school avoidance piece that's always been there just feels like it's at a higher level.
It's an interesting question. I don't think overall we've seen an increase in avoidance. I think that there are predictable time periods where we could say certain kids will probably have a episode of a school. for example, coming off of a long break, returning from the summer. And so we do a lot of work with those children on transitioning effectively. A lot of social stories work, which is basically helping kids gain some control over what's going to happen when they return to school. And literally it's as simple as we're looking at pictures of the school together. We're looking at pictures of new teachers that you might have next. We're talking about what it's like when remember when we go to the library together and we just, it's that kind of reminders and or in the predictable nature of what it is to go to school. And so we can predict pretty well because we know her kids, break here, be on the lookout for these couple students. And generally speaking, those are students that we have relationships with families. We plan together and say, okay, probably going to be a little tough when I drop them off on Monday. And
A lot more practice that I recall is go and certain more. Sometimes there are diagnoses, often I'm not downplaying the symptoms that these people are very, very sick, not emotionally well. I don't doubt that some of these have serious headaches, stomach aches, sleep disruption, depression, but it's hard to get people to
I would agree that I think that from my experience, it seems like a little bit older kids. But what I am seeing, and I agree with Luke, I think that from those we can predict certain times and certain patterns, and we can prep for that pretty well. Because there are sort of similar types of patterns. But I will say that I personally have seen some the cases that we are seeing school refusals, that we are seeing some more significant behaviors that are associated with them, in terms of just the length of the time that these episodes exist, and also the severity of the behaviors that are coming along with it. If it's a psychosomatic portion of that, or if it's just how it manifests in terms of their ability to, or our ability to negotiate with them.
Great. Jamie, what do you think the reason, or all of you, but echoing Jamie's question, the reason people resist going to counseling?
Sometimes there's a trend, I have my therapist, I talked about this last week, and there's sort of
Woody
this
Allen.
difference. Yes, exactly. But I think it's hard, again, along the lines of having perfect face life. It's hard sometimes to say, "Wow, I think my kid needs help," and I am not the I recently had a very sad parent kill their child, and I don't think that's a failure. Right? It's just, wow, need more help. I go and get some that I'm not capable. Study this. I'm going to be here for therapy or various nights.
Mm-hmm.
hard for to get a teenager to sit with you and do exercises, but that same teenager might find a psychologist, therapist, or
I think, yeah. I think that it's important. Yeah, I mean, it's a Luke was mentioning, that book Yardsticks and talking about understanding, taking perspective, and I think that sometimes as parents, it's hard for us to understand. We're looking at things. We need that outside perspective in order to really understand, to gauge where we're at. Stress and anxiety can you could be talking about something that is manageable with some changes in the home scheduling and routines and lessening some of the stressors, or it could be something where you're really talking about the need for a third party to assist you with. So it's really important to reach out to those resources in the community, be it in the schools or in the community, to really ask for that professional opinion, so that you're not feeling like I need to do this on my own and I'm failing my child and I'm failing myself. Gain perspective and use the tools that are available.
I don't want to see this. To college, they're going to unearth the kindergarten school psychology evaluation. I don't know where this comes from at all. I don't know if you guys hear that.
Yeah, we hear that concern, and the funny entry point I hear a lot from families who are coming to say, I have these concerns, kicking it off with an apology.
Yeah.
Always that so sorry to bother you. And the reality is that we are here to help. That's our job. And we have a continuum of supports within the public school to help kids with social and emotional, from small interventions at the classroom level, working with school psychologists, developing more robust behavioral intervention plans with kids. We have a gamut of supports that we offer. And the key to developing the right support is a really good relationship between and having the right kind of professionals with the right data and sense of what's going on for the child. And that's a hurdle to get over for some families in the process, and I completely get it because it's scary and there's trust that's being built, there's a relationship that you have to have a feeling of certainty about before you become a little more vulnerable and share some of what's going on at the home front. But I'll say without a doubt, we are most effective in terms of intervening appropriately with children and supporting their healthy development when there's a common, open dialogue about kids, when we're sharing information in an open way from school to home, and it's not about putting things on a permanent progress. Exact opposite, intervening. I think as an elementary. The intervention that we want to pursue at the younger ages is because there's research that the earlier and the younger you intervene effectively with kids, the more payoff it's going to have for kids as they develop.
Go ahead.
I was just going to jump in. I mean, I think that what Jamie brought up in terms of a record following a child is something that I often hear parents talk about in the private sector as well, that parents will come in and they'll say things like, I don't want you to keep a record on my child. I don't want there to be a file. I don't want this to come out when my child runs for president or, things like that. I mean, one of the things that I think is critical, I think we all know certainly about the health insurance, privacy protection, and HIP and stuff like that, but most of the people in my field don't have any great desire to spend time in a federal penitentiary. And it is something that I think most people who are in this profession are intimately connected to, is the need for absolute privacy and the need to really protect the child and the child's information at all costs. And that's something that we go to great lengths to make sure that the parents understand that we need to take notes both from a legal perspective as well as a a good clinical practice perspective. It helps us to really be able to understand how things are changing, but that information is very, very heavily protected and has huge layers of control around it. So it's something that would not follow your child anywhere. So.
Great points. And again, part of the destigmatizing of the mental and behavioral issues is getting people to understand that mental health is just like dental health. If you've got a tooth that hurts, you go see a dentist. And if something inside hurts, go see somebody, behavioral health therapist. And I will say too, we had a child who did benefit tremendously from cognitive behavioral therapy, and he got into college. So they got into college. I shouldn't be specific, but it was hugely helpful. I can't say enough about particularly the cognitive behavioral therapy, because it's very focused on the here and now. It's not beating up your mother or your grandmother or your father. I mean, that may be a component of it, but it's very productive, it's very positive, and it's enormously beneficial with techniques in their lives. So anyway, there were a lot of good questions submitted, so thank you all. How do you balance pushing your child to stress themselves versus respecting their stress? And anybody can choose. It's a free-for-all.
No alphabetical order?
No alphabetical order. And if you want to pass, I'll go to the next question.
I think it goes back to what we were talking about in a little bit earlier in terms of good stress versus chronic stress versus moving into that anxiety end of the continuum. I mean, I cannot say enough to parents the real critical need that your child needs to stumble and fall many times before they're going to be able to stand back up and feel even stronger each time. And you can't build a sort of a bubble around our kids and not have them be exposed to stress, have them be exposed to really challenging situations with their peers, with their academics, with their sports, with their other activities that they're involved in. These are all critical pieces of a child's necessary components to be, as they're growing up. I think that the piece to be mindful of, though, is when your child starts to demonstrate some very specific symptoms that says that stress is going beyond what they're able to handle. Some of the different pieces that I put on that handout, if you have a family history of severe issues with dealing with anxiety, your child is going to be more likely, we know from biological genetic studies, your child's going to be more likely to respond to stress with an anxiety reaction. And so in those situations, to be mindful of whether your child is having difficulty getting to sleep at night, is having difficulty when they're called on in class, if they start to shake and start to tremble and start running from the class. They're different. Kids are wonderful. They're not generally transparent. They're not generally opaque. They are transparent in terms of giving us a lot of the cues as to when they're not managing things well. And so I think it's always important to, keep giving them opportunities to be challenged and to be in situations that are difficult for them, but then to be mindful of where they're starting to show signs that they're not handling it well, and then to be able to help them pull that back some.
I would say two other things about the verb push. One is to have a good sense, and again, I plug this text, to have a good sense of where you're pushing is very important. If you're pushing into the dark, stressful, anxiety producing. If you have a sense of what's appropriate for my child, what's the goal that we both share that we're working towards, and how am I supporting you in meeting that goal, that's a very different experience for a child, because it's something that they are invested in alongside of you. So to the extent that in developmentally appropriate terms, you can explain the power of why we're going to get better at reading, why we're going to get better at whatever it is we're going to get better at together, why we're going to get better at dance, and what you want out of that, and me as a parent, what I want out of that, helps create a condition where it's not a push from behind into a strange unknown place, but a journey you're going on together, and you're a support. I'd also say there's a huge power in reflecting about identities with kids. and letting kids know that they're more than simply the portfolio of activities in which they participate, or even worse, than the silo of one activity that they're really, really expert at, or they're the pro at. Because that can be very problematic if a child sees themselves as a premier soccer player only, and there's going to be the stumble. There's going to be the day they miss the big goal. And if that's their only construct of a personal identity, that's tough to rebound from. So that to the extent that you can as a parent, reflect on the other identities that kids are constructing in tandem to that really, kind of targeted one. And I know kids generally gravitate towards one or two things, but, you're also a brother. You're also a great son or daughter. Also and so on. Helps build that resilience.